hadn't been set the night that the robbery occurred.
Okay, I think I'm
Dan
live
had
now.
came in, was in the
So,
habit of working on
I'm
evenings,
going to
different types
put
of
the
things, but
iPad over here
that
on this little
night
thing.
on standby.
Oh, I apologize for all the noise.
And open vault manually.
Actually, that's not going to work. It's pointed up at this.
Agents wondered if Dan Short
We'll
had
go
in
from
fact
this
been
up
to the
and
bank.
on my bass guitar. There.
The sheriff drove to Short's house in Arkansas. near
This is
Missouri
the
border.
quad I'm working on today, and the problem is
But
that
no one was home.
I put the frame upside down, so the bottom
Short's
plate
absence
is here,
alarmed
where the
investigators.
sandwich plate should be.
They couldn't help but
Reverse
wonder
those
what
two.
role the bank
So there's not
played
enough
in the
clearance
robbery.
to stick these
Within
camera
hours,
mounts
word
in
of the
between
crime
the bottom and
spread
top
throughout the
plate,
scandalized
or
community.
sandwich and top plate. So I put them on top of the frame itself because these,
Those are
I'm
small
using
town,
big
main
motors,
industries, poultry
2205
processing
motors
plants,
instead
some
of,
small shops,
what was it,
local merchants,
1306, I think?
quiet town.
They were 1306
tourism in the
motors, and now they're
summertime with the rivers, that's where it's going, but,
2205 motors.
Basically, just driving a
Running
small
at
town.
2300 kV instead of
Crimes like this
3100
did not
kV.
happen here.
So they're much bigger, lower kV motors.
Reports of the heist and the missing
Not that I'm
bank
going to try a
records
6S
filled
on
Noel
them.
news
I
broadcasts.
might, if they make some little 6S batteries.
Investigators received
But,
many calls from the community offering help.
So I've decided to mount the camera
One
on
call
top
from an
because it's
employee
the
at
props
Sibley
in the
Manufacturing
normal
just
mount. The
outside
props are in the
town.
way. The
Gave
fucking motors are
investigators
in the
their
way,
first
believe it
wreck.
or not. So there's
He reported a
a
red
better
pickup
mount
truck
here.
abandoned
I
in
was
the
going to
factory
mount
parking lot.
it like 90 degrees
The truck
because
was
this is the
registered
only way it
to
flies,
Dan
really.
Short.
You either go really slow or really fast.
Investigators found coin
So,
wrappers strewn across
I
the
guess
truck bed.
you can't have a flat
The
camera
truck
angle.
was
This is the
dusted for
lowest
fingerprints,
camera angle you can get,
but
which is
only
about 20
Shorts were
degrees.
identified.
So I'm gonna go with that. It's not very crash worthy because I had to
The
string
discovery
it.
of
I had to
truck
run the
gave
wire
case
for the
agent and
camera through
19-year
there. And
FBI
I need a
veteran
longer
Lavelle Farley,
I need a
couple of
longer,
scenarios to pursue.
cable for my run
At
cam.
the end of the first day, we
So basically, all I'm
weren't
trying
sure
to
if
do
we
is
were
decide
dealing
how I'm
with
gonna
a
secure
banker
this.
or with the banker, Mr.
I'm
Short. had
thinking
stopped
cable
with
ties or zip ties. That's the
stock
first thing
would
I'm
be
gonna
in
try.
place with his credit card. Airports could be in Kansas. The rental cars would be in.
Obviously,
check
glue
to
would
see if
work.
Perhaps a police car, but primarily we're looking for his body, either alive or dead, in the immediate area of Noel.
With Short still missing, investigators secured a search warrant for the bank president's house, hoping to find something that would lead to his whereabouts.
Stay please. Anybody home? Mr. Short.
Inside, all was quiet. In the kitchen, they discovered an overturned trash can, suggesting perhaps a struggle. They searched every room.
Hi, come here a minute.
Maybe I should have put it behind the stand.
By the bed, they found Short's glasses on the nightstand. He never went anywhere without them.
Let's get some light on.
It appeared that the banker had left in a hurry.
I'd say.
Try putting one behind the stanchions too.
Still, it was impossible to determine from the search whether he had fled or was abducted. With no sign of Short, agents canvassed his neighborhood, hoping for a lead. One neighbor, Carol Dryden, recalled seeing several vehicles pulling into Short's driveway the night of the robbery. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mike Jones was involved early in the investigation. According to Jones, Dryden's statement was critical.
Around 2 o'clock in the morning, which really gave us the first time frame. She saw lights going into Dan Sharp's property, headlights, and then about 15 or 20 minutes later, going out of Dan Sharp's driveway.
But the neighbor's statement didn't put the FBI any closer to finding Short. McDonald County Sheriff Don Schlesman was a lead investigator in the case and coordinated the massive search for the banker in the area surrounding Noel.
We set up command posts on the west side of Knoll. The groups were split up, giving roads to walk down. Highway Patrol had their helicopter down. We had airplanes. Just mainly did a search from the air and ground.
Beginning from the location where Short's truck was found, search teams proceeded outwards in concentric circles, hoping to find a trace of Short in the immediate vicinity. 5 days after the crime, there was still no trace of the bank president. As the hunt expanded, Farley and 22 agents from the Kansas City office formed a task force with local law enforcement. To house the large number of personnel, the FBI set up headquarters at the local armory.
This stuff is so messy.
While they unpacked, leads came pouring in from concerned residents. One tip came from local truck driver Buddy Mills. Having heard about the heist, Mills told an agent about what he saw on a road in Knoll the morning of the robbery. Returning home from work at about 3 a.m., he encountered 3 vehicles leaving town. One truck matched the description of Short's red pickup. He headed off with a 2-tone van. The other dark-colored truck followed Mills for a while until it turned down a road toward neighboring Arkansas. This information jibed with Carol Dryden's recollection of the traffic outside of Short's house at 2 a.m. Mills' account reinforced the time frame for the crime. Farley met with the bank president's ex-wife, Joyce, who had been married to Short for 25 years. Although they had recently separated, Joyce stressed he was a loving father to their 2 children. Having worked closely with him at the bank for several years, she never witnessed any impropriety. Yet Short was the FBI's only suspect right now, and after several days of searching, he was still missing.
But it's good stuff.
On October 11th, a couple fishing in Grand Lake, just over the state line in Oklahoma, hunted for a good spot to drop a line.
First time you crashed.
They motored to a favorite shady spot. Hoping to hook some bass, they sighted what looked like a clump of seaweed floating on the water. Moving closer, they made a gruesome discovery. Just under the surface, they saw the head and arms of a submerged body. 5 days after the robbery of the State Bank of Knoll, Missouri, a dead body surfaced. 2 employees of the marina towed it to a dock. The body was badly decomposed, but the coroner determined that the man had been dead for 5 days. Immediately after death, bacteria begin to break down the soft tissues of the organs, releasing gaseous compounds. After a few days, the gas fills the corpse and can lift the submerged body to the surface. Sheriff Don Schlesman recalled the bloated remains lifted additional weight from the bottom of the lake.
He had the chain tied to him in a concrete block and part of a chair. And it was pretty gruesome sight, really.
The corpse will float until the skin tears, releasing the gases. Then the body will sink back to the bottom. If the boaters hadn't seen the body that day, it may have never been found. The time of death was later determined to be consistent with the time frame of Dan Short's disappearance. The sheriff found a wallet in the victim's back pocket. Inside was a driver's license confirming the identity as Dan Short. The sheriff contacted the FBI. The search for 51-year-old Dan Short was over, and a homicide investigation had begun.
With his surfacing, which was almost in defiance of the people who had murdered him, it gave us the knowledge of what had happened, and it gave us the focus that we needed in the investigation to direct resources thereafter.
Farley and his partner Larry Nolan rushed to the lake to conduct their own review of the body. Special Agent Nolan's first task was to preserve the evidence.
Collectively, the decision was made to release Mr. Short from the chair, at which time I released him and preserved the concrete block and the chain hoist, the chair, and also the duct tape.
With Short's corpse freed from his death trap, the coroner removed the body. The medical examiner determined the probable cause of death was drowning. The chair with the block, chain hoist, and duct tape were examined and photographed by investigators before being sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. The task force set up a hotline and published pictures of the chair to alert the public, hoping someone would come forward with information.
It was clear from examining the chair and the apparatus, so to speak, that was attached to it, and the location of Mr. Short's body, that he had died a horrible death. All indications are that he was conscious when he was dropped from the bridge, some 30 feet to the water.
The hotline was inundated with calls, helping build a file of more than 80 suspects. According to Sheriff Don Schlesman, one promising tip came from an anonymous caller who urged investigators to question two brothers, Joe and Shannon Agofsky.
The Chapel Police Department dispatch received an anonymous call from someone that said the Agofskys had a lot of change in their possession, and a lot of change was what was taken from the bank.
The FBI tracked down 23-year-old Joe Agofsky at a junkyard just south of Knoll. The manager pointed agents to where Joe worked on his car.
That's him right there in the black vest. Okay, thank you. How are you doing? You Joe Agofsky? Yes, sir.
Joe said that on the night of the robbery, he had been at his girlfriend's house, more than 40 miles from Knoll.
Yes, sir. Very good. We're also interested in 45 handguns.
He was cooperative and told them he had two .45 caliber handguns, the same caliber as the weapon used to shoot out the security camera. They inquired if they could test fire the guns. Joe agreed and told investigators the weapons were stored at his home. His 18-year-old brother Shannon would be there to meet them. When the agents arrived, Shannon Agofsky showed them where the guns were kept. Shannon told investigators that on the night of the murder, he was at his mother's house, where he was still living at the time of the crime.
All right. Would you all right if we take these downtown?
After firing both guns, agents sent the shell casings to the FBI lab. Examiners there would later determine that they did not match those found at the bank. To lead Agent Farley, it was a dead end.
Both expressed their willingness to help the investigation if they could. Both had alibis for the evening of the crime. Given these factors, our attention was directed elsewhere with other suspects, as both the Agofsky brothers appeared to be not involved in this crime.
Back at Grand Lake in Oklahoma, where Short's body had been recovered 2 days earlier, resident Rowdy Foreman was out fishing with his son and daughter when he made a curious discovery along the shore.
We came across a wooden dowel, a brace, if you want to call it that, and it was just out of place.
Alongside the chair part, Foreman also found a piece of duct tape. Having seen pictures in the newspaper, he believed it may have been from the chair found with Short's body. He sent his son to fetch plastic bags from his house in order to preserve his find. Sheriff Don Schlesman and a partner drove to Oklahoma to question Foreman about the discovery.
And they asked me to have a piece of evidence. told him, I don't know if it's evidence. I said, I found a piece of duct tape. And his first comment was, oh my God, isn't that pretty? And they were looking at the fingerprint, just clear as day as a print.
The fingerprint appeared to be made from car grease, impervious to the lake water. But investigators still had to prove the tape was used in the crime.
Although the tape contained fingerprints, that piece of evidence was not relevant unless it could be proven to be part of the chair or the apparatus in which Mr. Short was drowned.
To prove that, FBI examiners would have to match the glue and strands from the torn piece of tape with the tape found on the chair. But that would take weeks. Until then, the FBI and local investigators still had no prime suspects for the crime. A week after the robbery of the State Bank of Knoll, Missouri, and the brutal murder of its president, Dan Short, the FBI had recovered Short's body, the murder device, and a possible fingerprint from a nearby lake. Investigators fielded calls from residents who were willing to help, but also afraid to do so.
Due to the manner in which Mr. Short was killed, although the local citizens were very concerned and wanted to be helpful, some were reluctant to do so out of fear. Therefore, some of the witnesses did not come forth. They did so sometimes out of the insistence of a friend or an associate.
Farley received one such call from a man who claimed his friend might have information about the chain hoist wrapped around the chair that drowned Dan Short. The friend's name was Wayne Boutain. Boutain owned a chain hoist which had recently been stolen. Though he notified the police, the hoist was never recovered. He suspected the Agofskis of stealing it. Farley showed Boutain the photos of the hoist investigators had retrieved from the lake. Boutain identified it as his own. He recognized damage on the pulley. He'd last seen the apparatus at Sheila Agofsky's house where he had once lived. Boutain agreed to take a polygraph test and passed it.
Another important development in the case was the determination that the chain hoist, which was duct taped to the chair, was property of Wayne Boutain, who had left it at the residence of Sheila Agofsky a few days before the murder of Mr. Short.
On the strength of Boutain's statement, Farley decided to question the Agofskys again. Driving up to their mother's house, he noticed an old van in the front yard. It closely matched the description of one of the vehicles Buddy Mills saw the night of the bank heist. Farley questioned Sheila about the missing chain hoist, but she claimed to have no memory of it. She also corroborated Shannon's alibi, saying he was at her house the night of the murder.
I don't know anything about it. I have no idea. I can't help you.
Farley left, with suspicions that she knew more than she was telling. He asked the brothers to give their fingerprints, hoping to match the one found on the duct tape. Joe Agofsky complied. When asked about the hoist, he told Farley he remembered seeing it at his mother's house, yet he didn't know what became of it. A few days later, Farley returned to Sheila Agofsky's. There he found Shannon with a friend by the name of Gant Sanders. Having secured Joe's fingerprints, Farley tried to convince Shannon to give his as well.
Instead of his fingerprints, it made things a lot easier. Not to get you out.
Joe Gowski was very cooperative and produced his fingerprints upon request without hesitation, while Shannon was evasive and hesitant.
Gant Sanders walked cautiously. Shannon echoed his mother's story, proclaiming he had no knowledge of the chain hoist. He eventually promised Farley he'd come down to the police station to give his prints, but he never showed. Although Farley had initially dismissed the Agofskis as suspects, he took note that Shannon and Joe's memories of the chain hoist were conflicting. Now, he decided to take a closer look into their background. Researching the family's financial records, Farley discovered that 9 years earlier they had received money from an insurance settlement after their father died in a plane crash. Popular opinion was that their money was still plentiful, making them unlikely candidates for bank robbers. But Farley learned that wasn't so.
While they had all received a considerable sum of money, as of that time, Joe had spent his, their mother had spent a large portion of hers, and Shannon Agofsky had a considerable amount of money still in a fund, but it was not available to him at that time until he was 21.
Agents found that both brothers had recently purchased cars with cash, yet neither had jobs. Investigators also determined that 18-year-old Shannon had spent more than $5,000 since the heist. Although the Agofsky brothers' spending looked suspicious, Farley still had no solid evidence linking them to the bank robbery and murder. Revisiting crime reports and witness statements, he made a new connection. Truck driver Buddy Mills said he had seen 3 vehicles leaving Knoll on the night of the robbery. That meant there was a possible third suspect out there. If 2 of the vehicles were driven by the Agofsky brothers, then perhaps the other was driven by one of their friends. Farley recalled the young man he met briefly on the Agofsky's porch the day he questioned Shannon, Gant Sanders. Sanders had recently become Shannon's roommate. Farley tracked him down at a junkyard.
The closest associate that we could identify of both Shannon and Joe Agofsky was Gant Sanders. It was learned that Gant had been good friends with both Joe and Shannon, both prior to and after the robbery and murder.
But Sanders said he knew nothing about the robbery and murder, although he offered no alibi for the night in question. Farley decided to question Shannon again, this time with a polygraph machine. The test was administered in a motel room by a technician from the Missouri capital of Springfield. A polygraph is used by investigators as a tool to rule out possible suspects. The machine monitors the subject's reactions to stress in 3 ways. Tubes fastened around the chest monitor the slightest change in respiration. Low-voltage electrodes placed on the finger detect moisture on the skin. And a cuff on the arm measures changes in blood pressure. The examination is based on the body's fight or flight principle. When the brain perceives a physical or psychological threat, the body responds by increasing blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration. Shannon Agofsky was asked about Dan Short, the robbery, and the murder.
Did you take the chain hoist from Wayne's and Chains?
Based on his physiological responses, the examiner determined that the younger Agofsky brother was deceptive about his knowledge of the crime. It was clear to Farley that Shannon was somehow involved. But he'd need more convincing evidence to bring charges. In December 1989, the Agofskis were subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury to answer questions under oath. Each family member gave testimony separately. Shannon, Joe, and Sheila each disavowed any knowledge of the bank robbery and the murder of Dan Short. After questioning, Shannon was once again asked to supply his fingerprints voluntarily. Again, he agreed and set an appointment. In Washington, D.C., FBI analysts continued to examine the items sent to them by the agents in Knoll, trying to match the chair part and tape retrieved by Foreman to the chair and tape that had been bound to Dan Short. An examiner confirmed that the wood found by Rowdy Foreman was part of the same chair that Dan Short was taped to. The piece of tape with the fingerprint on it was the most promising piece of evidence. But did it match the tape used on the chair and body? It did. Examiners were conclusively able to link these portions of tape by matching the torn ends, the fibers, and the glue. The tape found by Foreman had 2 complete prints on it. They compared the prints to Joe Agofsky's, but they did not match. Farley recalled this finding was not all bad news.
The fingerprint examiner notified me that the prints on the tape were similar to that of Joe Agofsky, but not identical. And he advised me that the fingerprints of siblings were often similar in pattern. Therefore, getting the fingerprints of Shannon Agofsky was imperative.
Although he told the grand jury he would provide his fingerprints, Shannon never did. But this time, Farley would force Shannon to comply by serving him with a subpoena. Grudgingly, Shannon Agofsky gave his prints to the FBI almost 5 months after the heist and murder. Since comparing his prints to those found on the tape would take several weeks, Shannon was free to go. But Agent Farley did not remain idle. He knew that Gant Sanders was close to both brothers and probably knew more about the crime than he had said. So he decided to confront him. If he had knowledge of the crime, he should cooperate with the investigation. But if Sanders was knowingly protecting the Agofskys and they were convicted of the robbery and murder, Sanders would be jailed for aiding and abetting. Worse, without a solid alibi, he was still under suspicion of the crime. But Sanders revealed nothing. He remained faithful to the brothers. Farley thought that perhaps Sanders was hiding his guilt with his silence. Agent Farley pursued 2 brothers, Joe and Shannon Agofsky, as the prime suspects in the bank heist and murder. Joe's fingerprints had been compared to the 2 found on the duct tape from the murder device. His did not match. As investigators waited for results on a comparison with Shannon's, additional partial prints were discovered on the tape. Now the FBI needed new prints from Shannon, a 360-degree view to match the partial prints on the duct tape. But Shannon was nowhere to be found. Farley hoped that it'd get to Shannon through one of the Agofsky brothers' friends, Gant Sanders. The agent also suspected Sanders could be the unidentified accomplice. But cooperating with the FBI would mean betraying his longtime friends. Finally, in June of 1990, hoping to clear his name, he contacted Farley, wanting to talk. Investigators told Sanders They thought that he'd helped commit the bank robbery and murder in Knoll with the Agofsky brothers. But Sanders claimed he had nothing to do with the crime. However, he did admit to his involvement in another, more recent incident. On one particular evening in late December 1989, Shannon and Joe Agofsky broke into a house in Missouri and stole several rifles. The brothers rendezvoused with Sanders later that evening, setting the second part of their plan into action. The next day, Sanders and Shannon drove across the state line into Arkansas and sold.
Oh man, it looks like we didn't have any video there for 3 minutes. Sorry about that. So now I'm just gonna talk about these things. We had quad extravaganza and then another little mini extravaganza. I crashed the Hawk 5 a few times and might need to replace the arms. I haven't for sure decided yet. So can I deal with that much distortion? It's not that much, but it is significant enough to notice. It looks like the frame is okay for the most part. It's not too cockeyed, but I did crash it pretty good. Going low to the ground about 50 miles an hour and flipped upside down and backwards and hit the ground. So wasn't much recovering going on with that. I damaged my pagoda antennas. All the big tall ones are broken, I guess. And now I understand why people don't like using them. But I still have these short pagoda antennas, and I still have the short, like 1.5-inch white pagodas that came with the Hawk 5. So maybe. I'm giving this one to my cousin as soon as I can catch with him. And I'm building one of these for my sister, and I got this one for my homeboy T. So 3 of these are gonna be gone soon. And I'll start on the 3-inch side. I thought I still had some more of those Nazgul props because that might solve this issue. With this thing here, you see the normal motors are what are they? 1306. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, these are 1306 on this 3-inch, right? And it's plenty power with those 3052 pin fan flash props. Plenty power, plenty speed. And with the 3045 DYS, it's pretty stable if you want to do some cinematic shit, acro shit, don't need the speed. But I got the flash. So this guy right here, these DYS props, which are 3045s, but with these big ass motors, it's still too heavy. So before I even get off the ground, I'm at 50% throttle. And you know that's just too much. So you can't arrest the fall. So I got to figure out something with that. I'm going to try. I was going to put the Nazguls on there because those are 3-inch props with 6.2-inch pitch. Pitchiest props that I know of for 3-inch. But short of that, I'll do the Gem Fan Flash 3052s. It's about 1 inch less pitch on those, and 1 inch more than the DYS, or almost 1 inch more. So hopefully that will give me, so I can get off the ground before I go over 50% throttle, because I think that's a bit much. But for a beginner, I think I might have found the sweet spot here, because the thing most likely to get damaged would be the camera or the motors. So for a noob, just give them this, and if they crash it, it's easy enough to fix, and it's $3 motors on there, $20 camera, or even cheaper. This is a RunCam clone. So you keep the cost down on that one, because the stock motors are expensive as hell. The stock motors are over $40 for a set of 4. These 4 motors are $12 for a set of 4. So that makes more sense for a beginner who's really just going to be thrashing the thing. I still have to figure out a way to get my camera mounted up here, because to put it in between those big ass motors and props, it was just too much distraction. So I want to mount it on top. There are some other mounts I'm looking into, but for right now, this DIY zip tie and whatever. Now zip ties and glue actually, and you know, feeling on it, it's stable. It's as stable as anything else that's going to be on top of the quad right there. Crashes will tell. You know, I had a couple hard landings already, no real crashes, but it does look like the lens is susceptible to damage in a rollover. You know, yeah, it would definitely be damaged. So that's an issue because rollovers, that's kind of like the way you land with this roly-poly heavy thing. But, you know, while everybody else is going light and putting in an HD camera, I'm making this heavy thing. But this is for the noobs. You know? It's almost Fisher Price level or Nerf kind of. You could make this more Nerfish too, for sure. I would think this might be a place where some kind of motor protector things might help. Maybe. But whatever. We're going for it, for sure. So the roll call things I needed to. This guy didn't get a good feeling. I mean, it's doing weird shit. I've had lots of crashes and it's doing weird shit. I'm thinking I might try some tuning because, yeah, there's nothing else that I can tell that's really going on that's wrong with it. It's a pretty good flyer, but it's doing some unpredictable shit sometimes. Like it can't overcome the pendulum effect. So maybe I can do that up the D game. We'll see. Anything else? Might want to swap the props on the full speed leader. Make sure we haven't cracked the frame and everything. It looks good from here.
He'd been arrested 10 years previously.
Yeah, I don't see any damage.
And he had a number of other arrests, mostly for assault, for molestation.
Yeah, feels
rape
good.
of a child.
These things are so light. I mean, you really don't want any cracks in your frame because it's not much vibration from yellow in the footage, but if any damage, then yeah, it's easy to get off. The Baby Hawk R3 had to replace the arms on the first crash, and the last time I flew it, I had to replace the arms on the first crash, and the time before that, so this is like strike 3 for this thing. If that happens again, you will see a Baby Hawk R3 up for sale, because I think I've only got one more set of arms left. Let me check that right quick, actually. I need to know. The other one is still new in the box, so there's no arms in there. Yeah, I'm down to my last set of arms. So, you know, to be honest, I don't even want this thing if I don't have spare arms, and that's just a bad thing. You know, it's like you know you're gonna break the arm so inevitably. It's like you want the spare parts like batteries. That's not an experience. You know, and as I've gotten a little better pilot, I'm not having the same kinds of crashes anymore. No more dumb 100 feet up fail safes and shit. It's mainly pilot error crashes now. Pushing it out of my own envelope, but still, you know, the arms are breaking too much on the Baby Hawk R3. I want to try the Raycon Heli 4mm arms, but I found out they're $20 a piece or a pair. So, you know, at least it's not that expensive, and it's hard to keep the damn screws in there. I've already lost a screw, as you can see, from the other side of this thing, and that's a no-go. I'm gonna have to fix that before I fly it, because having anything like that missing on this leads to undue vibration, and hopefully I can find the nut, because if not, I'm gonna have to find another one, because that nut is a must. So, but the hard part is done. I mean, it's so not fun changing those arms, because it's a good design in a lot of ways, but but it's not such a good design from the guy who's got to fix it. It's just a huge pain to swap those arms out unless you've got the right tools and have figured out a workflow that works for you. These two are just total disappointments here. Yeah, worse than the Dark Max. This one I knew probably had a bad motor from the beginning. So we'll see if it burns itself up or whatever. But yeah, 6S is a no-go for that one. It did okay on 6S for this one. Just okay though. It did not seem comfortable. It did not seem like a long-term thing that I'd be able to do without just, yeah, it's not gonna work. So see if there's any videos to watch on these. I know there's plenty. Let's see if I can. Maybe there's something I missed. But otherwise, these two will be for sale soon as well. At a nice discount. I mean, I probably will look to sell these in the $100 or less group, just because I need to get rid of them. That doesn't include shipping, but they don't cost much more than that new. I think maybe $200 max for these. You know, but more likely 150 new. So you can save $50 buying it used for me and know what you're getting into. If it's this one, I already bought the spare motor. I've already dealt with resoldering this thing. You know, the quality control and what you get out of it. It is fast as fuck. Don't get me wrong. This is the fastest quad I maybe have ever flown. The Dark Max 220, whatever. As far as that, it's finicky and temperamental, not durable, not put together in a smart way. So there's all kinds of pitfalls you can fall into. Not a good quad at all. And this one, you gotta say the same thing. It feels crammed, like an afterthought. Shit's just kind of crammed in there. Yeah. Live and you learn, though. Like I said, I won't buy any of these China quads for much over $100. You know what I mean? They're not worth it. So next up, I'm gonna be trying. Oh yeah, this guy. I got a bad flight controller, so I might have to swap the ESC and the flight controller in here if it's because I don't think I can make this flight controller match up with this ESC because there's like nowhere to solder. This is one of those newfangled boards, man. There's not like a place to solder everything. I mean, you see the obvious solder place right there, but that's not what I'm talking about. Sorry for the lack of focus here. But yeah. Okay, so you can put a transmitter on there. That looks like the 3-volt. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out. More flight controller, one ESC coming. But looking at these prices, man, it makes me kind of sad because I can't justify building anything. The prices of the binding flies are so low, and the prices of the parts are so high that I'm still stuck buying binding flies in search of parts. And you know, whatever, if that's the way the market is, I'll do that. I'm not gonna go broke overpaying for parts.
Investigators knew she was around at midnight.
It's ridiculous. You know, how can they justify that? When you can get 100-mile-an-hour binding fly like the Dark Max for $100, but you can't get the parts. You know what I mean? It's like the parts for the Dark Max, and it adds up to $300. But the Dark Max, the same parts put together is whatever the sale price is. So I give up trying to understand it. But I'll just buy the money. The Dark Max is for sale again for $129 right now. So I want another Dark Max really, but if it doesn't work out, I need the parts. I need more of those motors. And at 129, I'm paying double the price of the motors for the whole thing. So if I was to buy 2 sets of those DYS motors, I would have paid more than the price of a Fine and Fly Dark Max. So let's say I buy one set of the motors, it's right around $60, you know, for 4.
The FBI's prime suspect in the abduction of 9-year-old
And the frame is $60, so that's $120 for the frame. And they're selling the stack for a little over $100. So that's 120 plus 1. It's $220 for the Dark Max parts, and that's before you buy the parts like the camera. You know. And I see this happen over and over again. I never see a deal, or I see a deal discount for parts like one thing, whatever one stack or one thing they're trying to sell, but never for a whole entire bill.
She was too badly decomposed to confront her mother.
It makes me wonder, like the Chinese stat capitalists, like they really are watching the market. You know, more people are buying Fine and Flies than kids. I guess that's the case. So yeah, you don't want to go with less pitchier props. These are
in the pocket of the jacket were part of the
soul load.
and removed from an interview.
Wow, they even labeled them 3045. So yeah, the same as the ones on there. But these are bull nose, and those are a little more efficient. So I think I'm gonna skip that and just go straight for the Hokies. The main thing holding me back from doing it is it was too hard to tighten down.
Starting from the location
Now that I've made those,
they worked their way out in a concentric circle, collecting anything that looked like it could be used as evidence. Investigators swabbed walls and door frames in an effort to find clues. Figuring whoever moved the body into the room had to come in contact with the door. They removed it from its hinges and sent it to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. Under the latest microscopes, the FBI examiners discerned a thumbprint on the door. Comparison to samples they had on file were conclusive. The thumbprint came from Alton Cole.
These fresh DYS props on here. One out in fluid. I gotta have my throttle above 50% just to get it off the ground. You know you're gonna be doing some hella crashing. That's how I broke the first camera. Well, hopefully I didn't break it, but I can't get it to work. I'm just starting to learn about the pin-out diagrams and stuff, like how you can fry stuff or have something that works, but you didn't plug it in right, and it's not gonna work until you plug it in. Which one works the best? I like this one. Necessity.
Agent Showers, I think the original thought that there could be some connection with Coleman.
The report also mentioned something that investigators found disturbing. There were 2 killers, and the second suspect was described as being a black female. Investigators immediately
This one works, but it rips through the heat shrink so quickly.
If investigators were right,
You're scratching your motors again.
They were on the move, and they were leaving bodies along their way. At the hospital in Gary, Indiana, local police officers questioned 9-year-old Mary Jones about the afternoon of June 16th.
Got a battery dying over here. Let's see.
Mary told the officers that she and 7 others were walking to the store when they were approached by a man and a woman on bikes. The couple introduced themselves. They told the little girls that they had some clothes that the girls might like.
Yeah, I like this. This is the one right here.
To retrieve the clothes,
Grab
Mary
that
Jones
motor
followed the couple into the woods.
Not scratch it or anything. The first one did scratch it.
Mary was close to death and she managed to drag herself to the street. She was able to identify Coleman, but could not identify Brown from photographs sent by the FBI. However, the girl's description matched Brown exactly. Now, investigators were dealing with 2 killers.
We had looked at Deborah Brown up until that point in time as a witness because she had cooperated with us in Waukegan. She told us about Alton telling her that he had done something wrong. She showed us the clothes that he had been wearing the night he had come back, when he'd been out all night and he came back in the morning. So we had looked at her as a witness. We now knew from the investigation and Gary that she was likely assisting him.
Investigators struggled to figure out some way to predict Coleman and Brown's next move.
Man, I love having this wrench.
Both murders occurred in largely black communities.
This one will
Communities where the two could easily
longer.
blend in. And they were quick to gain people's trust.
These were street people. They had that charm. They didn't have to do any hard twisting. It was always a very easy thing with them.
Searching for anything that might help them locate and stop the killers, investigators consulted an FBI behavioral profiler. For the profile, the escalating pattern of violence was caused by Coleman's legal problems back in Waukegan.
He saw the fact that he had taken Bernita the night before a court appearance on the rape of a 14-year-old, and that he had abducted her, and then murdered her as an indication that he was responding to the stress of the court appearance, and so that he would continue to murder out of anger and stress and rage.
Investigators had reason to fear that the 2 murders were only the beginning of a ferocious crime spree. To capture a serial killer, the profiler suggested a massive national media campaign aimed at the black community.
So we started a publicity campaign, releasing his photograph, releasing pictures of Brown to the media, press releases, everything we could to get his picture out in the forefront. Our hope was that somebody would see it.
Okay.
But the task force was always a step behind. On July 8th, agents received information from local Ohio detectives about an elderly woman named Rose Williams who reported her daughter missing. Rose explained that earlier in the day she had come by to check on her and found the door locked. Her young grandson, James, was too frightened to open the door.
Struggling.
The detective convinced them they were there to help. Now he had nothing to fear.
Oh man, I hate this when this happens. It's so hard to get these props off sometimes.
Officers immediately started to search the house for the boy
This
missing.
one can take. Well, I spoke too soon.
While looking, they
If you
found
can pull it
3-year-old
up to the
John,
threads,
afraid
usually you
of
can
his older brother.
get it up. But this one ain't budging.
Meanwhile, James told the detective about the man and woman who had been at their house. He showed the 8-year-old photos of the suspects, Coleman and Brown. James positively identified them as the couple who were there the night before. Searching the house for the boy's mother, the police found blood smeared throughout the kitchen.
This thing's like glued on here, man. I don't know if I'll be able to get this off at all.
It led down to the basement. Not knowing who they were awaiting, the investigators followed the grisly trail. In Ohio, police responding to a missing persons call made an alarming discovery.
You're ripping my skin off.
The young son of the missing mother had identified fugitives Coleman and Brown as having given their house.
You guys are so
Blood stained the
good
room.
at this.
They proceeded cautiously, not knowing if their suspects could still be lurking in the darkened basement. The trail stopped, where the bodies of mother and daughter, Virginia and Kimberly Black, were discovered, shoved into a crawl space beneath their home.
Coleman and Brown, we didn't know where they were, and the violence connected with the murders and crime scenes was beginning to intensify.
The officers continued their search, still believing their suspects
Injured
could be
myself.
somewhere in the family's home. But they seemed to have slipped away, leaving behind unmistakable evidence. Clippings of Jerry curled hair. James recounted for investigators that his mother, Virginia, had met Coleman and Brown earlier in the day. The couple stopped by the house and played with the kids. Virginia invited them to stay for dinner. It was just like any other summer evening in the neighborhood. Virginia cooked while the kids hung around and chatted with their new friends.
I'd rather not get stabbed.
8-year-old James saw Coleman take a knife from the counter and slip it into his back pocket. After enjoying dinner together, Coleman, Brown, James, and his younger brother settled into the living room to watch television. At the top of the evening news, the story of a pair of killers on the loose flashed across the screen. Coleman immediately turned off the television and shuffled the boys off the bed. While Kimberly and Virginia washed the dishes.
After I fucking destroyed this thing, brand new prop, of course.
Aware of the growing
Threads
need,
and all kinds of. I mean,
Coleman realized he and Deborah needed to change
Should
their
get
look.
some American engineers on this shit.
He found some scissors and
Some
cut off
people
his hair.
who know how to build stuff and not just not just the lowest budget wins. Like, it's just everything. Christ, this is me to fuck off
Coleman,
sometimes.
with Brown and his son, approached the little girl and her mother.
So much of this kind
Just
of dumb
upstairs,
shit involved.
James and John
That's what
were
kept me
asleep.
out of it initially, knowing that I'd have to deal with shit like this on a regular basis. It's not a hobby. I don't know what that is.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
They dragged the slain woman and her daughter downstairs and stuffed them into a crawl space.
The pressure was mounting, it was becoming increasingly stressful, because here we were for the fourth time, catching up with him when we found their bodies.
Coleman and Brown's MO was designed to catch their
This one
victims
goes
off
lefty
guard.
sided.
When someone comes up to your house on a bicycle, you figure them to be a boat. If they're walking, you may be a little bit suspicious. But if they're riding a bike, they're from the neighborhood. Your guard is automatically down.
News of the murdered mother and daughter horrified the community. The savage nature of the killings caused the FBI to add an 11th position on their 10 most wanted fugitives list. It was a rare occurrence. The number 11 ranking was reserved for
Still gotta tighten it up
particularly
more,
vicious
but
killers. A description fitting Coleman and Brown.
this
The
one
language
here
and the
is
importance
lefty
of it,
tighty.
You know, you've already
Make
got
sure
10
you
in
put the
your bag,
props
but
on
here's
it's
one
going
that's so
in the
bad
right
that you don't have
direction.
room to put anybody else on.
Lefty
You know, there's
tighty.
an exception, put him on the other, even though he's number 11.
With the national media spotlight focusing on the couple, it would be difficult for them to remain anonymous.
And in solving fugitive cases, fighting people, there is nothing better than publicity. Because all you need is for one phone call,
Okey-dokey.
from one person saying, I saw this picture, and I know it's this individual.
This picture of this.
Phone calls poured in with more frequency and speed than ever before.
We'll see what happens
Any
when you do
crime
this
that
with
matched those suspects'
high
was funneled
pitch
back to the
props
task force headquarters.
instead of
Hopefully,
low
they would be
pitch
able to get
props.
one step ahead of the fugitives. Investigators were sure that Coleman and Brown would tire of a life on the run and return to familiar territory. Agents contacted everyone who associated with the Waukegan.
We would contact them and let them know that we're still looking for them. We would go out and tell them that Alton and Deborah have been involved in another murder case, hoping that that would get them a little bit more on our side.
On July 13th, local investigators responded to a frantic 911 call from a suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincy.
Michelle Stone told the officers what had happened that day.
Serious?
A couple arrived at the Stones' house earlier that night.
No, this is not good. I have to use the collapse. Nobody is
They
that
told
strong.
Michelle's father, Jack Stone, that they were interested in buying his camper, which was for sale in the driveway.
So
Jack's wife Anna joined them on the porch.
usually I scratch the shit out
As
of
Jack and Anna chatted, Michelle
That's how your
offered,
brand new motors can look old. But these are $3 motors, so that's what these are for. Learning and flying. Make sure we didn't destroy any of the
when she arrived home later that
soldering.
day,
Not
Michelle
lovely
noticed the
soldering.
bikes the couple
I'm
had
such a
arrived on were still
talented
in the
solderer.
yard. In her father's
This
car,
one is lefty loosey. Lefty tight.
inside, she found her parents' home had been vandalized.
Mom,
She had called out to her mother and father.
Correct, but maybe necessary.
Hearing no response, her mind began to race as she stepped through the shattered glass and overturned furniture littering the room. As she called 911, Michelle could hear a weak voice calling out from another room. Next to the basement door, she noticed a bloody palm print. She walked down into the
Don't have
familiar room,
anything left in
not
here.
knowing what or who she might find. Lying next to each other, motionless on the floor, she discovered her parents. Her father Jack was barely alive.
One more.
As she reached to take her mother's pulse, she lifted the sheet. Her mother Anna was dead. Her father's son for help
That's
to
it.
alive.
Not doing this. Yeah. And you see, just from the one use, I gotta replace the heat shrink that I put on there. On
The parents had been
both.
bludgeoned
On
and
both.
died. Michelle's description of the couple that had stopped by her parents' house earlier
That's
that
what I'm saying. We have incomplete solutions here, and people want to make money. That's the reason why people do stuff. There's plenty of money to be made in
A
stuff,
forensic
these
team went
little
to
tiny
work
little
collecting
things.
evidence. Among the items was a pair of plastic shoes next to Anna Stone. A recent sighting of the suspects included a description of Brown wearing these same shoes.
How much time can you look at my beard?
Crime scene technicians also retrieved other bloody tools found around the body. Later, forensics confirmed the crowbar was used to kill Mrs. Stone.
Alright, so I'm gonna fly my little clock out there.
He made no attempt to conceal
Maybe use my buddy goggles.
but there was nothing
It's on the right
to
channel,
suggest
so
where the couple had gone.
I never ever use these goggles anymore. Make sure they still work.
Everything we find about
They're good goggles, VRO ones.
You don't have
Very
anything
good
as to
goggles.
which
They
way
just
we're
don't have
going.
very many
You have
channels.
no indicators as to who the next victim's going to be. Depends. If they want a sexual
Turn this
gratification,
bitch on.
they may snatch a child. If they need a vehicle, they may snatch an adult. Just don't know. We've got a couple of million dollars out there.
Couple of
The
minutes.
crime against the Stones showed the couple was able to gain the
Let's
trust
see
of
what it
people
does
from
with the
outside the
real
Black Open
problem.
centers where they had found their first 4 victims. This realization only complicated the investigation.
I'm hoping and praying
Coleman
that
put
there's
further
not a
in.
fiery type result here. I'll be back shortly.
Where they would come up on a bicycle and stuff, chatting, and he would be looking to play in a card game, or sometimes they would respond, they wanted to buy something, or they had something for sale. He was an extremely good person, a real con man, and people trusted him. Plus, he was traveling with a woman, and so people were not nearly as suspect of him as they should have been.
Though Coleman's rage continued to intensify, his ability to charm more victims remained consistent, and he was showing no signs of growing tired of the crime. A month and a half had passed since Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown embarked on a killing spree that had left 5 victims dead. In Cincinnati, Coleman bludgeoned a husband and wife, leaving the wife dead and the husband barely clinging to life. Their car was missing. NAPD was immediately put out on the route.
So the battery just kind of
2 days later, a farm worker discovered the abandoned car in his property in Lexington, Kentucky.
So yeah, it's good to do thing. Have any place to put this? Just gonna have to take my word for it. No, I'll put it over here. It's gonna stay like that. To give you an idea of how little, I mean, I'm at 75% throttle. But it's also super stable for me. There's no pump out, that's full throttle. So the main thing to worry about is having them crash into the ground. So, but it's pretty good for a move chopper. And there's absolutely no heat or stress to these motors at all. So, it's like I didn't fly it at all just now, you know what I mean? No heat at all. Heat at all on the motors. I mean, I think that this is not a load for them. So There will not be any heat, no matter what props I put on here. I could go right on up to the six
In a matter of
6
hours,
inch
the
prop
received
Nazguls.
response.
I mean,
The
my
Kingston
goggles are
Police
hotter than
in Howard Town,
than
close
this
to the Kentucky
motors
border.
here. I can live with that. So
The
we got the
professor's
gym
car was
fan
found
flash props
abandoned
on here.
behind some vacant buildings.
And I'd say it's good to go. I want to put it on 4S before I give it a full clean bill of
For
health
the experienced agents,
and give it to a
finding
new.
your car on
And
the
also,
highway meant Coleman
I
and
want to
Brown were
fix the
probably
camera
on their
right
way home.
before I give it to a new.
Got instance that
But
they
we're
was
getting
gonna
there.
come back home. He
We're
may
getting
not
there.
come back to Waukegan, but he's gonna come back to some place that he feels comfortable with. He'd never
I'm not
been to
gonna
Gary, Indiana. He'd never
fuck
been
with
to
this bench
Detroit,
battery
he'd never been to
again.
Toledo, he'd never been to Cincinnati, Dayton, Ohio, Lexington, Kentucky. At some
Wouldn't it
point,
be
he's
interesting
gonna
if I
get
could
tired.
put
He's
4
gonna
inch
wanna
arms
get back
on
to
this
comfort.
thing?
Some place that he feels
That
comfortable.
would be
He knows the streets. He knows the people. He's gonna feel comfortable. He's coming back.
I mean, I felt like a tiny bit of
The FBI immediately set up a dragon.
So,
Agents and police officers from across several states joined forces to track Coleman and Brown as they headed home to Illinois.
so now I'm going to take these 3 6S batteries and put them to
Reports of
bed.
stolen
Put them in
vehicles or
storage
assaults
charge.
will be given immediate attention. An officer in Dayton, Ohio, responded to a report involving an assault in a stolen car. The call came from an elderly couple, Reverend and Mrs. Gay. Reverend Gay had been badly beaten. Mrs. Gay told the officer that a young couple that they had met weeks earlier broke into their house. After beating them, the attackers demanded the keys to their station wagon. According to the description, the attackers were Coleman and Brown. New leads were coming in at a furious pace. Coleman and Brown were still just out of reach. But the FBI was starting to close the gap. The day after the attack in Ohio, detectives involved in the FBI's dragnet discovered a station wagon that had been abandoned near a car wash in Indiana. It belonged to Reverend Gay. Later in the day, some road troopers on the edge of Interstate 65 outside of Zionsville, Indiana, made a gruesome discovery. It was the body of an elderly man who had been reported missing from his home in Indiana. He was found on his 77th birthday. Evidence left at the scene was unmistakable. Coleman and Brown had claimed another life. The body was found less than 20 miles from the couple's home turf. The country's most wanted fugitives had come home, and the FBI was waiting for them. For 7 weeks, Coleman and Brown assaulted and killed victims in 6 different states. While investigators worked the crime scenes, scores of local officers and agents organized a dragnet to track them as they headed back home to Illinois. The aggressive media campaign was having an impact. On July 20th, in Evanston, Illinois, a man spotted Alton Coleman with Deborah Brown in Mason Park. While he waited with the car running, his friend called the police. It was the one phone call investigators had been looking for.
That school was Alton Coleman. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that the man across the street from Fred was Alton Coleman.
Evanston police responded. Only a couple of yards stood between the law and Coleman and Brown. With surprising ease, they were able to corner Coleman. He insisted they had the wrong man. The second pair of officers surrounded Brown. When asked, she gave a different pair of names for herself and Coleman. Having found a knife and a false identification, the officers brought Alton Coleman to the police station.
This is Harris.
A search of Brown's handbag uncovered a .38 caliber pistol. Their weapon was all they needed to handcuff her and take her in. Two of the FBI's most wanted were apprehended without incident. After nearly 2 months, the violent rampage was over.
Yeah, this thing's out of focus.
Coleman continued to insist he hadn't been in any of the places where the murders happened.
That's simply
But the forensic evidence collected over the past 7 weeks proved otherwise. Alton Coleman was charged with the federal crime of kidnapping Grenada Reach, followed by murder charges in 3 other states. Deborah Brown was also charged for her role in the murders. As investigators from the task force looked on, a strip search uncovered a bloody steak knife.
It is broken.
It would be linked to yet another murder, a 15-year-old Ohio girl, Alice Myers. Illinois State's Attorney Matthew Chancellor was given the task of prosecuting those
Broken, but
involved.
it still flies. I mean,
In
it's
his
so
mind,
small.
the motive was simple.
When he moved across the threshold, and once he crossed that threshold, it was easy for him. And I think that he enjoyed it. It wasn't just easy anymore, it was something he liked to do, he liked doing. And so he looked for every opportunity he could to repeat that.
Together, Coleman and Brown had stolen 7 lives. 3 states sought to take theirs. Brown stood trial separately. He was sentenced to life in prison to Coleman.
At Coleman's sentencing hearing for that murder, she testified on his behalf that she had committed the murder and he had not. It was an obvious attempt to try to save him. It didn't work.
Coleman and Brown's rampage had covered over 1,300 miles in 6 states. For Special Agent Virginia Personel, the intensity of the FBI's hunt prevented more needless murders.
Because of the massive investigation that we did, and the publicity that we did, that he was caught within 7 weeks when he started. Had we not done that, had we not gotten on this right away, who knows how long he would have gone on camera.
In the end, Alton Coleman was sentenced to death 4 times. He went to prison in Ohio, where he was executed on April 26, 2002. From the Caribbean islands to the east coast of the United States, the deadly drug gang makes millions. But its leader remains a mystery. As the cocaine trafficking business thrives, the violence rages out of control. To destroy the gang, agents and police know they must identify the leader and take him down.
United States is one of the drug markets in the world. To ruthless and sophisticated drug traffickers, it's truly the land of opportunity. I'm Jim Kowski, former head of the FBI New York office. In the 1990s, a violent drug organization moved thousands of kilos of clean cocaine into Georgia. It would take a task force of dedicated agents and police to shut down this multi-million-dollar operation and destroy a cocaine empire.
The U.S. Virgin Islands are a tourist's paradise. Lush tropical islands and miles of sandy beaches, all in America's backyard. But these islands hold a dark secret. Law enforcement refers to them as the cocaine funnel. Because they are located halfway between South America and the U.S. mainland, drug gangs use the islands to ship large amounts of cocaine into the U.S. Starting in the early 90s, a drug gang called the Island Boys shipped thousands of kilos of cocaine into the U.S. through the Virgin Islands. They chose the unlikely city of Augusta, Georgia as their main point of entry. There they turned the cocaine into crack. FBI Special Agent Tim Cox.
It was primarily the population that drew them in. At the time, there were several projects that were ripe for selling crack cocaine. It's also a 2-hour city. You're 2 hours away from Atlanta. You're 2 hours away from Savannah.
But the competition between the Island Boys and local drug gangs is brutal. Eugene Smalls runs the Augusta operation for the Island Boys. Business is good. In 1991, the gang is raking in millions. And Smalls makes a big target. There are rumors he keeps $1 million in cash in his safety deposit box. He wears the key around his neck. By the time Augusta police arrive, Eugene Small's safety deposit box is empty, and the powerful drug dealer is fighting for his life. He survives, but his injuries are severe. The rising violence in Augusta concerns police, and the Island Boys are at the center of it. The Augusta police discuss the problem with the FBI. They start by explaining what they know about the gang.
The local authorities, through their contacts with informants and some of the arrests that they made previously, knew that there was an increasing number of these gentlemen coming up from the Virgin Islands. The informants have given indication that they were moving more and more cocaine into the area.
In October 1992, the FBI and U.S. Customs worked to build a federal conspiracy case against the Island Boys. Cox suspects the Island Boys are working with a major Colombian cocaine cartel. One thing is clear, they are as mysterious as they are deadly.
We didn't have any inroads into the group. We were having to put together as much intel as we could by bits and pieces.
Agents assemble photos of suspected gang members taken by the local drug squad. Former U.S. Customs agent Larry Sapp.
So I'm not even reading who they were. We put them in there to see if somebody would later identify them.
They also scour every report they can find that has any connection to the Island Boys. One report stands out. A month earlier, 2 DEA agents spotted Eugene Smalls at the airport in Atlanta. Despite his injuries, the local drug boss personally picked up a passenger on a flight from the Virgin Islands. The DEA decided to follow Smalls. Agents radioed the Georgia Highway Patrol and asked them to pull the car over for speeding.
The DEA had enough of following them and joined the locals there and they got them all out of the car, searched them, took all the money, tried to interview them all.
Smalls could barely walk. His passenger, James Springett, was carrying a passport from the U.S. Virgin Islands. Agents also searched the car. They found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, and surprisingly little cash. The DEA photographed the two men as well as their credit cards and IDs and had to let them go. Agents can use the credit card information to track the movements of all four suspects. But there's also a downside.
Then they know that they've been watched or being watched, and may affect their behavior in the future. They be more careful of surveillances and more careful of movements and things of this nature.
Agents wonder about James Springett. Who is he, and what role does he play? Eugene Smalls picked him up at the airport personally, even though Smalls was still recovering from bullet wounds. Obviously, James Springett is important. Special Agent Cox contacts the local police to see if they have any information. The Richmond County Sheriff's Department Narcotics Squad have been fighting the gang since it first arrived in Augusta. But they've never heard of James Springett. If law enforcement hopes to take down the Island Boys, they're going to have to do it the hard way, from the bottom up.
We started on the street level, doing surveillances when we could, getting information from the local authorities, and trying to develop some other inroads into the group.
Again, they hit a brick wall. The Island Boys have a dangerous reputation. Even paid informants were afraid to talk about the group.
It was hard to develop informants because this group was known to be violent, and informants were afraid to do anything with them because they had a reputation for hurting and killing people.
Federal authorities conduct surveillance. They observe that members of the gang frequently use motel rooms to do business. After they check out, teams of agents search their rooms.
You'd be surprised that you find phone numbers, photos, different things. This whole case was like somebody had filled a room with puzzle pieces and we're trying to dig our way out and figure out who was who.
The pressure is constant and intense. Too intense for Eugene Smalls, the head of the Augusta Island Boys.
We were putting a lot of heat on him.
Eugene Smalls decides to relocate to Virginia.
I personally think that the reason Eugene left was that things were getting too hot for him around Augusta.
In Small's absence, a man named Shaquem Gabriel becomes the new leader of the Island Boys operation in Augusta, Georgia. Agent Sapp alerts Virginia authorities. Eugene Smalls is heading their way.
They were on as soon as he got up there, and he worked in the, ran a good case up there.
Smalls is arrested in Virginia Beach for drug trafficking and eventually convicted and sentenced to 90 years in prison. In Augusta, agents focus on Shaquem Gabriel, the new leader of the Island Boys. They suspect the gang is bringing drugs in through the Atlanta airport.
When you look at the amount of money that they were running, plus the amount of cocaine that we knew they were putting on the street, it was obvious they were having to run lots of loads of luggage through and use lots of couriers.
On June 14, 1995, agents in Atlanta find a suitcase containing 7 kilos, more than 15 pounds of cocaine.
Who delivered the coke to?
Investigators question the courier. He tells agents the drugs were going to Shaquem Gabriel in Augusta.
We got enough corroborating information, through phone tolls and things to substantiate exactly what the courier was saying.
Based on the courier's statement, authorities are able to obtain an arrest warrant and a warrant to search Gabriel's home. On June 15, 1995, Authorities serve both warrants. As the agents close in, they have no idea what Gabriel has waiting for them behind his door. In Augusta, Georgia, the FBI, along with U.S. Customs and local police, work to take down a violent drug gang. Investigators arrest Shaquem Gabriel, the man they believe is the new head of the Island Boys in Augusta. Gabriel is accused of attempting to receive 7 kilos of cocaine from a courier from the Virgin Islands. A search of his home turns up documents, photos, and $15,000 in ones. Special Agent Tim Cox.
Apparently Shaquem felt it was beneath him to spend dollar bills, so he wouldn't spend dollar bills, he would stuff them in his jar.
For law enforcement, Gabriel's arrest is a big success, but it doesn't stop the Island Boys. As soon as authorities take Gabriel into custody, agents suspect that new leaders are already emerging to take over the gang.
Whenever we would take people off from the group, like an arrest or anything else, other people from the islands would arrive back in the States and take their place in the group, distributing around Augusta area.
Investigators continue to go after the Island Boys using the same techniques they used to take down Gabriel. But it's not working. It seems the Island Boys have changed tactics. They must be using another means of getting their drugs past customs at the airport. Agents have to find it. Customs expands its searches both in the Virgin Islands and in U.S. airports. On February 6, 1996, agents get a break when a random customs check finds cocaine in a suitcase arriving in Atlanta. The bag belongs to a teenage girl from a housing project in Augusta. The gang has been eluding police by using couriers that don't fit the usual profile. Former U.S. Customs agent Larry Sapp.
They would find young girls that had no money, no future, and ask them if they'd like to go to the Virgin Islands for a week, free vacation. And of course, England would say yes. And one of the stipulations was you had to bring back a package for them.
These were easily influenced young people that just saw an opportunity to make some money. Granted, it was illegal, but in a sense, they were victims of this group as well. They couldn't bring a lot to the table for us, but what they could tell us is who offered the deal, what the deal was.
The courier tells investigators she was hired by the girlfriend of Brian Gustav. Shortly after Gabriel's arrest, Gustav and his girlfriend arrived from the Virgin Islands. They've been running the Augusta Island Boys. The girl also gives them the names of other women who have worked as couriers. It takes more than a year to gather all the evidence against the new local leaders, but investigators have enough to arrest Gustav's girlfriend. Brian Gustav is convicted of drug trafficking. His girlfriend takes a plea deal. Agents have taken out the leadership of the Island Boys in Augusta once again.
When you do take them down, and the next week the same group is up and operating again, it gets a little frustrating, but that's why we work to go up and get to the head of the organization, because that's eventually the only way you're going to be able to stop them.
Arresting drug dealers in Augusta is not stopping the flow of drugs into the U.S. Agents know they must find out who is running the Island Boys operation. Their leader must be in the Virgin Islands.
In 1996, the U.S. Virgin Islands became designated a HIDA, which stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area.
Detective Chris Howell is on the DEA task force formed to target drug traffickers in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
And up until this time frame, there hadn't been a lot of targeting of these people with established routes in cocaine trafficking. So the traffickers, by this point in the game, had become pretty powerful, and they had a lot at their disposal. So we had a lot of catching up to do.
Agents begin questioning informants and learn that in St. Croix, a prominent local family is involved in the cocaine shipments from Colombia.
intelligence information that was gained from confidential sources stated that one of the family members was the St. Croix girlfriend of James Springett.
Investigators recognized the name. In 1992, DEA agents photographed Springett after Eugene Smalls picked him up at the Atlanta airport.
And that informant also told us that he was the biggest drug trafficker in the islands. And so our focus kind of started to begin to switch focus from this prominent family over to James Springett.
Investigators discovered that Springett's girlfriend has more than half a dozen cell phones in her name. These phones may hold the key to cracking this dangerous drug gang.
When we began to look at those phones and look at the toll information off those phones, other names that came up through informant information began to appear on those tolls. And it was obvious that this girl had, something to do with what was going on.
While agents pursued the cell phone lead, they continued to work the streets. From informants, agents learned that a small shipment of cocaine is scheduled to leave St. Thomas via seaplane. The surveillance team spots a suspected courier carrying a cardboard box aboard. The seaplane takes off for the largest of the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Croix.
We let them board the plane and get airborne on their way back to St. Croix. And we established surveillance where they were going to dock here in St. Croix.
When the seaplane lands, Detective Chris Howell and the DEA are waiting. The box the courier is carrying is full of cocaine. Agents are in place for a routine takedown, but the plan changes. Something has spooked the courier. Agents must move in.
The individual who was carrying the box ran straight to the ocean, jumped off the dock into the ocean. As he tore into the box, kilograms of cocaine began to float out into the water.
The courier is trying to destroy the evidence.
He knew that if he could get those packages open, once that cocaine hit the water, it would just dissolve to nothing. But I wasn't going to take any chance. I wanted to get all 7 kilograms. I didn't want him to tear into anything.
Detective Howell rescues several kilos of evidence and a cell phone purchased by Springett's girlfriend. The courier is in serious trouble and he knows it. Still, he refuses to tell authorities who he's working for.
In the islands, it's very rare to see people cooperate. Very rare. When we arrest somebody, even when they're facing serious jail time, they'll just do their time, and that's it.
As a result of the operation, the island boys are now on high alert. They know the feds are watching them. They quickly change their tactics.
Springett made an executive decision that they wouldn't bring cocaine directly into the U.S. Virgin Islands.